Hello, everybody. Happy Friday, and welcome to the Fanatic Forum for a very special episode here. This is all part of the Multiverse fundraiser here. Of course, we are celebrating comic books for kids, and all the charity proceeds go to them once again this year for the second year in a row. So we're very happy to be part of that. Down the bottom there, we've got the link to our Facebook page for Multiverse fundraiser, how you can donate, all that good stuff. But tonight, Seth Manhammer and myself, we have got a very special guest on here tonight. I'm so excited about this here, guys. Of course, we have got, in my opinion, one of the finest wrestling historians, at least in the Southern Indiana, Kentuckiana area here. My friend John Cosper. Welcome back to the show, sir.
It's a very tiny niche little area, and there's me and Cornette, and I'll put him ahead of myself, but I appreciate it, George. Thank you so much.
Hey, you're very well. You guys are a tight-knit community as wrestling historians, as the nationwide kind of goes. So, you guys have your own territories, and you have this territory down pretty well here. So, yeah, you're Dick the Bruiser right now. You've got this, you got this area. No one's challenging you. So. And then, of course, it is my absolute honor to introduce to you, of course, a Memphis wrestling icon, because, I grew up in the Louisville Gardens area, so this was my ring announcer. And then the voice of Ohio Valley Wrestling, Mr. Dean Hill. Thank you, sir.
It's my honor.
Thank you for being here. Yeah. Yeah, like George, it's like you're one of the voices for me for wrestling for this area. It's like, yeah, it's just like you're ubiquitous with just wrestling for me. So this is a huge big deal. And of course, John, good seeing you again too, sir. Thank you again for coming. And yeah, sorry, I'm kind of marking out over here, but
well, that'll be $50.
Yeah.
All right, I will Venmo you.
I got just off on a side story here. So Bobby Blaze in Ashland, Kentucky's become a good buddy of mine. And one of his trainees, Reese Ramon, and say something out in that area, I always try to see them. And I've got the guy who was the best man at my wedding. One of my best friends for like 30 years, Tyler. He lives out there as well. So last time I was there, met up with Tyler. Then the two of us went to meet with Bobby and Reese, and we get together. It's like, Bobby, this is Tyler. Tyler's Bobby. Tyler's not a wrestling fan, but Bobby goes to the bathroom and he's just got this look of like, I just met Bobby Blaze. I can't believe it. I'm like, you've been here your whole life. You haven't. This town's not that big, but it was cool. It was cool.
Wrestling's got that kind of fandom here. Aubrey's tuning in tonight. Aubrey Cabot, good to see you, dear. So intro music rips up. Oh, thank you very much. And I'm doing great to answer your question. Thank you very much. All right. So, of course, one of the main reasons why we have both John and Dean on here tonight is because you guys collaborated on a little book here called See You at Ringside here, A Life of Rocking, Rolling, and Wrestling. So let's get down to business here. Let's talk about, how did this book actually come about here, John?
It really so I've known Dean since I started writing books about wrestling. He was one of the guys that I interviewed for Bluegrass Brawlers after he got permission from Danny Davis, as I recall. He had a conversation with Danny before he would talk to me. We've known each other for years and would see each other at OVW and different things and stuff. And really what triggered us writing this book was he had made a comment or something on a Facebook post about me writing his book, and I messaged him and I said, 100%, I would do it. I mean, you've got great stories, and people would love to hear what you have to say. So but that's really what kind of tipped it off. So,
and how it really started was somebody put on Facebook that they had met a celebrity and how cool they thought it was to meet a celebrity. And I responded back that, yes, I once had the privilege of meeting Frank Sinatra, and I thought that was great. And the person responds back, said, you've done so many things and met so many people in your lifetime, you should write a book. And I responded, who the hell would read a book about my life? And then one thing led to another, and John said, I think there could be something. And so then John and I did something that was the most important part of this book. We met in a parking lot. And sat in his car or my car, and I would just tell him stories that I remembered about my life. And when you're living your life, you don't really think that much about it. But when you sit back at the end and you look over what you've done in your lifetime, all of a sudden you go, yeah, that was pretty cool. I didn't realize that.
I mean, yeah, you really do kind of take stock in everything. Because, of course, well before you got into your ring announcing career, you've done quite a lot. You've been a police officer. You're a musician. You've done, you've done bodyguard, work as well for, judges and even some celebrities. So, there's a great story about how you basically kind of got noticed during your law enforcement career that led to your ring announcing career. And this of course is in the book. If you want to share that with us, Dean, here.
Well, when I was on the police department, I got divorced at the very beginning, and I needed a part-time job. My ex-wife and I, we split everything basically down the middle. She took the house, I took the payments. She took the car, I took the payments. And so I needed to have a part-time job. And Andy Frayne Security was hiring police officers to work at Louisville Gardens. One thing led to another. I ended up getting a job offer to run security for Louisville Gardens. I did that for 17 years. And every Tuesday night, myself and 4 uniformed security guards from Andy Frayne would walk the bad guys to the ring. And Miss Christine Jarrett, Teeny, got to know me there. There was a time where Bill Dundee and Jerry the King Lawler were fighting, and they had fought their way up into the rafters of Louisville Gardens, and part of it was taped off. And some of the fans were starting to run around the top of the arena to try to get over there by them. And I needed to get up there fast, but I couldn't run up the ramp because they were on it. The seats for Louisville Gardens back then, the back of the seat was locked in, but the part that you sat on would fold up into it. And so I was pretty young and agile back then, and I just kind of ran up with my feet on the top back edge of the seat, boom, 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 all the way up to where I got up to where and I stopped the crowd from going over. Well, Teeny thought that was the darndest thing she'd ever saw.
I can imagine.
Cornette would tell me about how often she talked about it. Well, one week, the ring announcer wasn't going to be able to be there. And they asked me if I wanted to do it. And I was always a class clown. I thought, well, heck yes, I want to do it. So I went up there and I did it. And when I got done, Miss Christine came to me and said, the ring announcer can't be here next week either. Would you do it again next week? Well, I didn't really watch a lot of professional wrestling when I was a younger man. My parents were into boxing back then and all that stuff. And so I went home and I turned on professional wrestling and I listened to a show. And I found out basically if you just lower your voice a little bit. And so I put on a coat and tie the next week and I went out there and Jerry Jarrett told me, he says, say anything that you want before you ring the bell. Say anything that you want after you ring the bell at the end of the match. But don't say a damn thing while the match is going on unless we tell you to. And that's what I did. And at the end of the night, Miss Christine came up and offered me the job.
Wow. I still love. I guess because of course you're a tall guy, Dean. So I can just imagine you you're just going over those seats and everything like that, and just stop. It's like that. Just that visual enough would probably stop what's going on. So
and I'm 6'6", and the funny thing was that whenever I was in the ring, whenever the superstar Bill Dundee was in the ring with me, he would say, "Get away from me."
About how it,
me being that much taller than him, but it was funny.
Rip Rogers talked about how at OVW they did everything backwards, everything the opposite of what you're supposed to do. They had a ring announcer that was taller than every wrestler. They had a manager that was bigger than every wrestler. I think we all know who that was. So we were talking about him earlier.
Oh, love that. Seth, you got a question?
Yeah. So actually, I had two questions. Number one, John, you said whenever Dean had to first talk to Danny Davis to get his permission to talk to you to begin with. So it's like you kind of had to get vetted by Danny Davis for what you were saying there.
It
Like,
was just wanting to make sure that Danny was okay with him because I mean. Dean came up, during the years of kayfabe, and Danny certainly, was the world of kayfabe and everything like that. So,
right.
Nobody had ever really done, a survey of wrestling in Louisville and kind of the story of wrestling in Louisville. I did ultimately have a talk with, I had a couple hours with Danny and Rip, Danny's office at OVW. So I spoke to Danny as well. But it was just, it was just, I think, and Dean can answer this better than I can. Just a respect thing, is it all right if I talk with this guy? Because nobody knew who I was at the time,
Right.
and it was really my first foray into anything nonfiction, much less pro wrestling.
Yeah, it's a respect thing. When Danny Davis started OVW and wanted me to come over and start off as the ring announcer for him, he approached Jerry Lawler and asked permission for me to come over and work for him as well while I was working with USWA.
Right. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. And indeed, yeah. What was one of the stories in the book too that I wanted to ask you about specifically was what Jim Cornette called the greatest bump no one ever saw.
Oh my God!
Yeah, if you could tell us a little bit about that, because the way you describe it in the book was fantastic, but unfortunately on television it didn't translate too well. What exactly happened there?
Well, they were running an idea where Jim and I were at the place where we were doing TV was set up in the air. It was about 4 or 5 feet up on this little ramp and a little platform up there. And there was steps, about 4 steps or so, that you would walk up to get onto this platform behind the desk with the logo of OVW behind us. And Kenny was going to come up there and take an issue over something that Cornette was saying. And then the concept was that I was supposed to get up and grab Kenny and bring him off of Jimmy. And so when that happened, he started coming back on me, and I couldn't hold his weight against it. And I reached back to try to find the back before you go to the first step, going down to the concrete, and I couldn't find it. And all of a sudden, he was falling on top of me. And we fell straight down about 4.5 feet, maybe 5 foot, straight onto the concrete, my back on the concrete. My head went through a plastic tub that they had setting out there for memorabilia and T-shirts and stuff like that. Yeah. And so Bolin, with all of his Bolin.
He froze it for a second.
All of his Bolinness.
Or I should say, Kenny's left leg weighs 120 pounds. And he fell on top of me, and I shattered this container with my head. And Bola looks at me and goes, "Are you okay? You're laying on top of me. Get off of me." So, Cornette calls that the biggest, because the only person that saw it was Jim Cornette, and I think Danny's daughter, April, I believe, was in the general area. She saw it, but nobody else in the arena. Oh, we just disappeared. You didn't see it on TV. You didn't see it on nothing. But that was one of the times. If I had 9 lives after that, I only had 8.
I can imagine. Yeah, because it's like, we were talking about it before. Yeah, Kenny Bolin is not a small man by any stretch.
JBL's nickname for him back in the day was the Blue Whale, so which was Kenny wore as a badge of honor. Yeah, he had a blue suit, so that was kind of what inspired that. So,
well, of course, one thing John covers in the book very much is that throughout, even before Dean gets into you get into wrestling, you've run across a lot of different celebrities. Of course, you met the Lone Ranger. which was got to be a huge big deal for you.
Got his autograph right here.
That's awesome. But of course, the one I can appreciate because, of course, my grandpa was a country music fan, and he liked a lot of music that was popular around the time when I was a kid. And a lady he was very much in love with was Miss Barbara Mandrell. And of course, there's a good story in the book there, and I've got to know: is Barbara Mandrell the one that got away? Could she have been, a future Mrs. Dean Hill at some point?
Yeah, if I would have just returned her phone calls. She was
You're just busy, yeah.
Yeah, she was a very sweet person. I was her bodyguard during Kentucky Derby. That year, she was the Grand Marshal in Pegasus Parade. And at the end of Derby Day, she was doing a concert at Louisville Gardens. So I took her from the Derby down to Louisville Gardens, and she went in to get dressed. And I started, of course, I ran security at Louisville Gardens, so I was putting people on the doors they were supposed to be at and all that stuff. And I came back to say goodbye to her as she was getting ready to go on stage. And they were doing a song where she was singing the first verse off stage, and then she would walk onto stage and sing the chorus. And as she got ready to sing the first verse, we were about 18 inches apart from each other, just saying goodbye and thank you for letting me take care of you and all that. She grabbed my hand and she started singing this love song straight into my eyes. And she sung that first verse, and she squeezed my hand twice. She turned and she walked up on the stage, and of course the crowd went crazy, and she sung the rest of the song. And I never ever saw her again. But that was a cool moment.
Yeah. Woo.
I've had a couple of cool moments from the people that I've met at Louisville Gardens. I sold a gun to Steven Tyler of Aerosmith. I had a steak dinner with Ted Nugent. I've met. Here's one of my favorite little stories about Louisville Gardens. If we have time.
Please, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So Louisville Gardens was the kind of place where you came to if you're an entertainer, if you're on your way up the ladder or if you're on your way down the ladder. If you were at the top of the ladder, you were at Broadbent Arena for 25,000 people. But Louisville Gardens held about 6,000. So this young artist was on his way up the ladder. He had just put out his first record. And he had hired a guy who was the vice president of the New York Outlaw Motorcycle Gang as his security guy. And so the security guy said, I want this, and you put somebody on that back door, and if anybody knocks on it, don't answer it. If somebody goes out, you close that back door. But you do not answer that back door. So a little bit later on, I get a call, say, hey, get back here. This guy's chewing this usher out. And so I go back there and I put the usher to one side, and I stepped in front of the guy and said, what's wrong? And he starts screaming at me about blah, blah, blah. And I said, are you done? And he said, yeah. I said, you told us not to do this. You told us to do this exactly this way. Well, this producer comes over and said, I think his name was like Tony or something. He said, I want to tell you something. This officer is exactly right. He did exactly what you told him to do. And if you ever do this again, you're fired. So now this artist was sitting in the back of Louisville Gardens in the alley with his guitar in his hand and could not get into his own concert. And his name was Prince.
Wow.
The book is full of stories like this. And if you go in, it's probably somewhere around where Dean is, but he's got a couple of different collages of all the passes that he's got from all the different concerts. And what was really fun when he and I met in his office and everything like that, the one he pointed out, take a guess what band he singled out that played Louisville Gardens. Give you both one guess here.
Oh,
Prince.
geez. Yeah.
Milli Vanilli.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I'm looking at it right now.
Yep.
Yeah, but for those that don't know, Milli Vanilli was a duo that were fancied as a really great looking, a little bit of dancing and a great singing duo. And then they found out sometime into it that they couldn't sing. Somebody else was doing the singing off stage. They were lip syncing it. And somebody got mad at them at some point and turned off or quit lip syncing, and they were just standing out there on stage.
Yep.
Yeah.
Doing that and exposed them and shattered, what, if you want to call it, a career. But yeah, I've got everything from Eazy-E and the NWA to the Doobie Brothers to Eric Clapton, Cheap Trick, but Milli Vanilli was my favorite one.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's an infamous. I mean, they won Grammys at the time before before the gimmick was exposed, and
I mean, obviously, they've been doing their spin high five to go get their New Artist of the Year award. So yeah, remember watching?
Yeah.
And of course, later after everything was exposed, they tried to do it for real. It's like, oh, we can sing, but yeah, there's some good documentaries about those two and their story. But that's
and then they exposed Paula Abdul for the fact that she wasn't actually singing with a 6-foot-tall animated cat on opposites attract. I mean, man, we all fell for that one, right?
Yeah. That one broke my heart. Yeah.
Spoiler alert.
Right. Yeah, this is a spoiler after 30 years. But I still wouldn't tell anybody the end of Usual Suspects. That's for another time. So.
Exactly. Well, of course, going into talk about wrestling here for a little bit. Let's talk about OVW because as big as Memphis wrestling was, it was towards the end of that run there. But then there was a bit of a gap in wrestling in Louisville until Danny Davis started Ohio Valley Wrestling. So, can you talk about some kind of those early days and how you were involved, kind of literally from the beginning?
Well, I started with the CWA at Louisville Gardens. They later became USWA, and you had Lance and Dave Brown was doing their weekly show. At one point, Randy Hales, Randy West, who would come up there at Louisville Gardens on Tuesday nights, said, "Hey, we want to put you on the TV. We want you to talk about what's coming up this coming Tuesday night at Louisville Gardens. We're going to put it in the TV show when Lance and Dave Brown went to a break." And so I did the first one, and Randy West said, "You got to have some kind of a sign off, some line to say." He said, "Oh, I know. The guy used to say this. You can use it now." And that sign off was, "I'm Dean Hill. See you at ringside." And so that's how I got into that. And then they went to a spot where I was there for quite a few years and loved every bit of it. But they went into a spot where they were in transition, and they brought in a guy. I do not remember his name. I wouldn't want to mention it, even if I did remember it. But he came in and he said, Dave Brown at the time had left. And he said, "We want you to be Lance Russell's new partner. Can you get to Memphis this weekend?" And back then, the police department had an anti-drug rock and roll band called Street Heat. And I was playing bass guitar for Street Heat. And we had a concert that weekend that they wanted me in Madisonville, Kentucky. I couldn't get there, but I said I could be there the week after. Okay, so I was getting ready to do that. I went on the concert with Street Heat that Saturday in Madisonville, and I came back. And then Tuesday night, I was going down to Louisville Gardens, knowing that on the following Saturday, I was going to Memphis to do my first taping with Lance Russell. And this new guy that USWA had hired to kind of run everything was, they didn't realize at the time, but he was a big time con man. And I got to Louisville Gardens that Tuesday night, and there was no wrestling. The front doors were locked. And I walked inside. Of course, I had the ability to get down into the basement, but I walked inside and I'm looking around and I'm going, "What in the world's going on?" Instead, basically, this guy took as the song says, "Go on, take the money and run." That's what he did. And it caused USWA to fold. I went around front to be with the fans that were showing up, and there was some wrestlers who were out there. Gosh, if I remember right, Dutch Mantell was one of them, and a couple of the others were out there. Wildfire Tommy Rich, and they were just talking to the fans, saying, "Hey, we don't know what's going on, but there's no wrestling tonight. We're hoping we'll be back next week. Tune in on TV Saturday for more information." And needless to say, I was called and said, well, we don't need you to come to Memphis because we don't know what in the world's going on. And it ended up causing them to fold. And then I'd been given permission by the king to go over and work with Danny. And he was just starting his TV show. And as that kind of, I'm one of these guys that as one door shuts, another one seems to open. For me, it's been that way my whole life. It's just a blessing. And so I started working with Danny and the hustler Rip Rogers, and the rest is history.
Oh, that's outstanding. Of course, I got a couple of pictures here. Definitely want to share here. That's probably got to be at least the first episode or very close around that for Ohio Valley Wrestling, because just because of the background that they use for there.
Correct.
And then one of probably my favorite commentary team for OVW there, you and Mr. Jim Cornette.
Jim was fantastic. He could talk for 30 minutes and never say the same thing twice and keep you on the edge of your seat. There was a joke between us that Jim would pretty much just talk, and then whenever he needed a drink of his Sprite, I would take over while he had a drink of his Sprite, and then he would give me the nod and go back into it again. So it was a lot of fun.
Well, for just take a brief pause here, since we're at the halfway point here, we got to plug one more time the reason why we are here. This is the Multiverse fundraiser, and we are celebrating comic books for kids. That is our charity of choice once again this year. So if you would like to donate, the link is down there at the bottom for the facebook.com, the Multiverse fundraiser here. If you're not familiar with comic books for kids, we've featured them on the show numerous times. They're one of our sponsors, an outstanding charity that literally gets comic books, toys, all kinds of fun things to children's hospitals, literally kind of an anonymous donation. That they work with the hospitals. The families, the kids have no idea the charity are the ones providing these things. They think they're coming from the hospitals, but just a little bit of sunshine to give some kids going through some very tough times. So it's just an outstanding charity.
And ladies and gentlemen, if you're looking for something to give to, this is a great thing to give to. Pull $1 out of your wallet. Help these kids out.
Absolutely. Well, I've talked enough here. Seth, I want to give you another question.
Yeah, so we've mentioned him a couple of times on here, actually. Hustler Rip Rogers. And specifically, so it was the NWA Legends Fan Fest in Charlotte back in, I think it was 2018 or 2019. Anyway, so Rip Rogers shows up and he's just wearing like what he walked on the plane with, right? And then to see him that weekend to like finagle his way into free everything. Like the man never paid a cent for anything. He wasn't even supposed to be there. So so I was just wondering, like, what were your all's experiences with Rip Rogers, that, as being a character like he is, just kind of a larger than life being, if anything.
John?
Oh shit! Rip's always been very kind to me. He's a funny guy. He is a guy that could not be on George's show just because of the language barrier. For a while, he was living in Indianapolis in the same house with the world-renowned wrestling and boxing photographer Scott Romer and former OVW wrestler Dylan Bostic. And at one point, I joked with Romer. I said that's a reality show right there. It's like, but it's a reality show. Probably get all three of you canceled and probably thrown off the planet. So, Rip is a character, and he's got a million stories. His story about Randy Savage in the Waffle House, which I think Dutch Mantel put in one of his books, is one of the greatest wrestling stories of all time. The night Bo the police dog would not put Randy over, as he put it. I've always had positive interactions with Rip. He told me one time, pulled me aside. He said, "What you do is a good thing for wrestling." And it was one of the best compliments I've ever had. So I haven't seen him for a while. Always he's one of those guys that Rip's in the room and he's talking, I'm going to shut up and listen because it's going to be insightful. It's going to be vulgar, but it's going to be hilarious too. So
Everything that John has said about Rip is accurate, 100%. The one thing that I always noticed about Rip was in the ring. He could come out to the ring and do nothing but walk around the ring for the first 10 minutes, just pissing everybody off. And he would roll into the ring, he would roll right back out. And he would go over and he would get into this person's rear end, and they were inflamed. And they're up to 8, 9. He'd roll in, roll right back out. You're 10 minutes into the match, and Rip hasn't even had a collar and tie up. So yeah, it's that was Rip Rogers, and everything that you said about how he spoke to people in the training sessions was quite accurate. But everything that he told them was gold.
For sure.
Yeah. I mean, that's why he's basically been, the trainer with OVW since the beginning. So you've had a lot of other alum that have come and gone and been turned trainers later on, like Doug Basham and Nick Dinsmore a little bit. But yeah, I mean, there's always been Rip. So
Rip's maxim: work smarter, not harder. I took that into my day job multiple times and quoted that many times because it's applicable to more than just being able to work a wrestling match for 20 minutes and only actually wrestle for 2 of it. So, which by the way, Tracy Smothers, another guy who excelled at that. He could be out there for 25 minutes and maybe exert himself for 2 because that's really all he had at that time. But you're entertained the entire time he's out there.
Yeah.
So that's both those guys.
Absolutely. Well, a question I got for you, John, here. Basically, of course, with any time you're doing any biographies you're doing, whether, be for Dean or any other kind of wrestler, past or present, are there any challenges you come across, either within, digging into your research or with talking to people, trying to get stories or anything along those lines?
You got to make sure you have a clean car if you want me to sit in it and listen to you tell stories. So, which Dean always did. I mean, every book, it just really depends on what the subject is, who the subject is, if it's an individual, and when it took place. So, I mean, I spend time with guys like Dean. We're actually finalizing a book with legendary Larry D from down in Georgetown, Kentucky, his life story. So when you're working with somebody, in the present day, that's one different thing. That's mostly about making time and, being able to do stories and then go back and forth, make sure everything's accurate in the book, make sure it's the story they want to tell. If it's somebody that's passed on, I'm working with their families and then it's working with them and that, and being able to fill in the blanks becomes more difficult. And obviously the further you go back in time, the more challenging it becomes to sort truth from fiction and to be able to put together the narrative. So, I mean, it really just kind of depends on, what the topic is as to what the challenges are. So, with Dean, it was a lot of fun. Again, we would meet up and we would tell stories. I'd record them on my iPad. I'd take them home and listen back to them. And, one of the challenges is always, piecing things together and, just like a puzzle, this story goes here, this story goes here and everything like that. And then going back and, to some of the stories, you got to go, okay, can we put this name here? Is this a story that we really want to tell? The grandkids are going to read this. So, and my goal and my intention every time, I go in with somebody, either an individual writing an autobiography, or if I'm working with, for example, when I work with Chris Candido's family on his, or, more recently, with the granddaughters of June Byers, who's the villain in Queen of the Ring. We can talk about that in a minute. But just wanting to honor that and wanting, and really what I tell people is, for example, Dean, I only cared if one person liked the book, and that was Dean. With June Byers' family, I wanted them to be happy and be proud of it. With Candido's book, I wanted them to be happy and proud of it. So, and if they're happy with it, if it's the story they wanted to tell, the way they wanted to tell it, I've done my job. If other people read it, great.
Perfect.
If you're not reading Dean's book, you're missing out. Especially if you grew up in Louisville, especially if you grew up around OVW, because there's a lot of great stories. And even going back to his days in the police force, he had some, his signature is on the inside of the Louisville Slugger that's down there on Main Street. And the story of how that happened is in the book. That was a right place, right time story. But just a lot of great tales all throughout.
Absolutely. And of course,
that's a great place to autograph inside the bat.
Right.
Hey, you'll technically always be a part of Louisville. You know. Yeah.
Right, there you go.
Yeah,
And actually, John talked about this a little bit here. This is actually kind of a serendipitous occasion because the first trailer for the Queen of the Ring film, which is the biopic about Mildred Burke, has been released, and both you guys actually have some involvement with it. So, John, let's talk with you and how you got involved, and then how Dean got involved in the film as well.
Okay. So a year before they came to Louisville to shoot, I got a phone call just out of the blue from Ash Avildsen, who's the director of the film. I had no idea who he was, and I looked up like, oh, okay, his dad was the producer behind Rocky and the Karate Kid, most notably. But he was the guy that had been tapped to bring the Mildred Burke film to life. I'd met Jim Ross a couple years before, and he had the rights to it, and I believe Jim was one of the producers on the film. But Ash was the one looking into it, and he was reaching out to me because I'd written the book about Elvira Snodgrass, who was one of Mildred's chief rivals back in the day. And just wanted to know a little bit more information about her. So we had a conversation, sent him a copy of the book, and didn't hear from him after that. And then it was getting towards the spring of last year. A friend of mine, Terry Harper, reached out and said, hey, you need to go to dinner with me and a buddy of mine. It turned out to be Ash, who was in town scouting for the movie. And so we got together, we talked and everything like that. I brought, my binder full of photos and things like that. That was when he found out about the Black Panther, Jim Mitchell, who he ultimately ended up writing into the movie, Khalid Greenaway playing him. It was a little side trip here. It's about 2:30 in the morning at what's that building down there on 2nd Street? I don't remember the name of it. The Henry Clay building. We're on the ballroom on top of the Henry Clay building. And they're like, we're going to film all the entrances. And the very last one to come through was the Black Panther. And just seeing the Black Panther portrayed in real life at that moment was just, it still gives me. And then when the trailer came out last week, and there he is, right at the beginning of the trailer, it's like, oh, it's so cool. And he's a good dude too. We've had some conversation on Instagram. So, but yeah, Ash would reach out to me every now and then about some historical stuff. He asked for some photos to send to his costume department. It was a cool thing. I got a text from him literally a day or two before they started filming. He said, should I swap out this character with Elvira Snodgrass? And I said, yeah. And so that's how Elvira got into the movie, which was really cool. And then, buddy of mine reached out to me, the gentleman I guess as you're looking at it to my right on the screen, and said, hey, do you know anybody who's working on this film? So I texted Ash and I told him, I was like, hey, the voice of OVW, do you want him for the film? They connected him. And if you've seen the trailer, he's right there at the table. I got the photo from him the day they were filming, where it's him and it's Jim Cornette and Martin Cove. And I just found out the other day when I saw the new version of the trailer, that's Daniel Spencer on the other side of Martin Cove at that table too. So OVW's current lead official. So, but yeah, Dean is he's the ring announcer for the climactic battle between Mildred Burke and June Byers. So, which was it's just, I mean, it's so cool seeing all the OVW folks in there. Another one that thrilled me, and I haven't had a chance to talk to him about it, but Zach Pittman, aka ZDP, allegedly Super Z over at OVW currently. He's the referee for that particular match, and just historical nerdy deep dive. The official for that match was Billy Tom, who had been a pro wrestler. He's the guy who got Dory Funk Sr. into pro wrestling because he was his coach at IU. He was the IU wrestling coach, won a national championship at IU, coached I can't remember, it was 32 or 36 Olympic team, one of those guys won a gold medal. So that Billy Tom was his name. His brother Alex was a legend at New Albany High School. He was one of the legendary coaches at New Albany for years and years. And there's something or other in New Albany named for Alex Tom. I don't recall what it is, but yeah, just a fun. Everything kind of coming together and all the connections was just kind of cool with that. So
that's outstanding. And so, Dean, what was your experience with working on the film and being in that basic kind of recreation of a historical setting there?
The wildest thing that I found out was they had how they do the filming. We're at Actors Theater, and me and Cornette and Martin Cole were sitting next to each other, and they would have the lady that was doing Millie and her counterpart were in the ring, and they had the camera set up, and they would say, okay, I want you to do this, this, and this. So they would do that, flip, bang, and they'd go, okay, cut. And then they would move the cameras about 7 foot. They would do it again. Cut. They would move the cameras again. They would move the cameras again. They would move the cameras again. Cut, cut. They would film the thing over and over again as they move the cameras in a circle around the ring so that they can get different angles and everything. Well, when they were in front of us, filming away from us, we could sit there and scratch our ear if we wanted to. But when they were on the other side, looking towards us, whenever something would happen, we'd have to make little facial things, which was a lot of fun to do. And then I had the honor of basically, unless it ends up on the editing room floor, I think that my part is the very end of the movie, where I'm in there and I'm saying that your winner and clause, still your champion, Mildred Burke. And the crowd goes crazy and she jumps into her son's arms and all that kind of stuff. And I thought that was just so cool. Then I got a call about a month later and they said, would you be available to do some voiceover work? Well, sure. They said, well, we got a few things that we want you to do voiceover for us. Can you go to this sound studio in downtown Louisville on 4th Street, I think it was, and we're going to have a guy from LA Zoom meet with you, and you're going to go do some lines for us.
Oh, wow.
Well, they sent what I thought was going to be like 40 minutes worth of, 15 things. There was 8 pages of lines, and some of them were 3 lines long and some of them were 1 line long. But he would go, okay, we like that. Now say it again and emphasize the word if. So I would do that. And it ended up being well over 67 different things that they wanted me to do. Apparently they had a gentleman that had done these before, but I don't know, maybe they just didn't like the sound of his voice or whatever. So they had me redo all of this stuff. And so they said, you'll be here about 45 minutes. I was there 2.5 hours.
Wow.
Not because we just had to keep doing retakes. It was because there was so many things they wanted me to do. So I'm seen in the last few minutes of the movie, but my voice should be heard throughout the movie.
What's really fantastic too is, and this is credit to Ash and his crew, they really tapped and they really used local talent, in front of the camera, behind the camera. A lot of people worked as extras. A lot of OVW faces you'll see in the crowd. It was actually fun sitting next to Amazing Maria and listening to her complain about watching Mildred Burke and Gladys Gillam wrestle. It's like, can I please get in there and show them how to do this safely? A really cool thing that happened. This is a couple months after. This is probably getting towards the end of 2023. I went out to breakfast with my wife and my son after church, and we went downtown. It's not there anymore. It was Toast on Market in New Albany. Right across the street's the Grand Theater. And what does it say on the marquee? Mildred Burke versus Clara Mortensen, which of course is in the trailer now. So, and right before that, my son and I had been in Lexington to go see a concert, and I can't remember the name of the theater in downtown Lexington, but it was Mildred Burke versus Babs Wingo. So it was, which is
that's not the Vogue, is it?
It's not the Vogue. No, I don't remember. I saw Silvertide there 20 years ago. Anybody knows who Silvertide is, but that's the only other time I've been to that theater. But past it, actually, on our way to parking in downtown to go to up and see Disturbed. So, it's just really neat the way they tapped into Louisville. They tapped into the local talent and the local people. They really did. They
really did.
Yeah, they really brought all to it.
And dressed up as they would be in the 1950s. That was what was amazing to me too. All the old clothes and the photographers that were there with the old cameras that had the little push-in bulbs that like you would have at the time. Yeah. Very, very realistic, every bit of it.
Yeah, I love it. Of course, another local theater that was featured in the trailer was the State Theater here in downtown E-Town, which is literally about 5 minutes that way for me. And that was the talk of the town the night they shut down the street. But it was, of course, they did it later in the evening, but still shut down the street for a little bit of time, just so they could do establishing shot outside there with the marquee there. So yeah, that was great just to see that in the grand. I'm like, that was a lot of fun.
It was, and for me, the fun too that night was, just seeing, I'll butcher her last name, Marie something or other, who's playing Elvira. Seeing her come out as Elvira, of course, seeing Camille dressed up as June Byers, and then the Black Panther, and all the characters that were portrayed. The guy coming out as Gorgeous George and just eating up the booze, and seeing Nell Stewart prance to the ring, and the lady playing Gladys Gillum too. Just I thought she looked great, and Emily Betts Rickard looks fantastic as Mildred Burke. I'm really excited to see her.
Yeah, she does. Seth, you got a question?
Yeah. So, I understand too that this is also not necessarily Dean's first foray into the film or into the film world. Mm-hmm. That he or there's a couple stories in it about it, or in this book, or in the book about Ultimate Death Match. If you remember being involved with that. I'm sorry, I gotta go for the schlocky movies just because that's who we are here. So
yeah,
they copy that somewhere. It's interesting.
They was putting on this concept of a wrestling match that was to the death, and they flew me to Portland, Oregon, to be in this movie, and my buddy Al Snow and Abyss was in this movie, and so it was kind of a wild thing to be in. But then they had another little issue with they were going to bring me up to Scranton, Pennsylvania, to do Ultimate Deathmatch number 4 or something like that, and how many people can you kill? And so, but nevertheless. I'm getting ready to go, but they hadn't sent me an airplane ticket yet. And I get a phone call from Al that said, something's going on. We're not sure what it is. Hold off. Let me call you back. And I got a call from him. I don't know if it was later that day or the next day. It said, you're not going to get an airplane ticket. And our airplane tickets are no good. They had to rent cars and drive back because the guy, again, the song repeats itself. Go on, take the money and run. Right. And so the guy that was putting it together just walked away from the last movie, and that's the name of that.
Just robbed us of the Ultimate Deathmatch franchise. How dare he?
Oh my goodness. Oh, well, we are getting close to the end of this here. We got about just a little more 10 minutes here, but I got to give Mr. John some plugs here. Of course, we've talked about a lot of your books here tonight here with, of course, your June Byers biopic. That's this is your newest one, correct?
That's the newest one. Yeah, that came out for first of last year. Yeah.
Yes, which I need to get this. I need to get this book here. A fantastic story here. Of course, one of my favorites of yours. It's been around for a little bit. The original Black Panther, Jim Mitchell, an outstanding story, an outstanding athlete as well. And then another one very topical here. We were talking about it. The Ballad of Cousin Elvira Snodgrass.
Elvira Snodgrass. Yeah, I was really happy that they got her in the movie. She's kind of been lost to history. She had to retire early. It's I'm not going to spoil it, but a really fantastic story about how her career came to an end and how she survived that car crash, and then unfortunately passed away just from a heart attack a couple years after that. So even if you watch the Lipstick and Dynamite documentary from 20 something years ago where Moolah basically takes the opportunity to try to bury June Byers and Mildred Burke and put herself over. they don't even mention Elvira. They mentioned Mars Bennett, briefly, which surprised me, but they didn't even mention Elvira. But I mean, Elvira was number 2 for a good long while. She was Mildred Burke's chief rival. There was a story they actually worked the semi-main event of a show with Orville Brown in Louisville when he was the champion. And that particular match, that story blew up to Elvira Snodgrass and Mildred Burke drew 17,000 people in Louisville, which is not true, but it was documented and it was taken as gospel for decades till I came along and it was like, no, it didn't actually really happen. So
good enough.
But at the same time, I got to go back and, if you read the Fabulous Moolah's autobiography, she talks about, I wrestled June Byers in 1955, 56. I can't remember exactly if she put a date on it or not. She said, that's when I won the women's world champion. No, never did it. So, and the story for years too was that June Byers was only champion for 2 years. She was champion for almost 10 years. She retired as champion on January 1st, 1964. But Moolah, I mean, six months didn't go by before Moolah was claiming she was the world champion and she had pinned June Byers. And what's really funny, when I recently rewatched Lipstick and Dynamite, they ask her, it's like, how did you become women's world champion? She's like, I won the title. Well, who did you defeat? The former women's champion. She wouldn't name June by name in that documentary. So, but she never did. She never wrestled June. They did wrestle when she was Lillian Ellison in 1949, and she did beat June Byers at one time as Lillian Ellison, but she never beat the champion. So, but but getting back to, Elvira was the number 2 for a while. Nell Stewart became the number 2, and then the story's told, and I'm sure it'll be told in Queen of the Ring. It's definitely told in the June Byers book, and it was told in the Queen of the Ring book by Jeff Lean, which is a fantastic read if you haven't got it. June was switched in at the very last second because Mildred Burke kind of made it public they were going to put the belt on Nell Stewart, so they've had to flip it last second. And Elvira and June were kind of the gatekeepers too. Like if they had a new wrestler, they put her on the road. They would have to spend time in the ring with June, and they would have to spend time in the ring with Elvira, one or the other. And those ladies would, a couple years ago, I got to interview a lady named Belle Starr. That was her wrestling name. And coincidentally, she was the one in the car with Mars Bennett the day Mars Bennett unfortunately passed away in a car accident. But while talking to her, I told her, I was like, yeah, I wrote a book about Elvira Snodgrass. And she started laughing. I said, did you know Elvira? I was like, oh, she beat the hell out of me. These were some tough ladies. If somebody were to ask me, who would win between, legitimately, who would win between Mildred Burke and Ronda Rousey, I'd like to see that, because Mildred Burke was no joke. She was a shooter. She was 100% a shooter. And by the time that match came along in 54, because that match was a shoot, which is why it went to, June got one pinfall and there was no contest after that. They were shooting on each other for the whole time. And by all accounts, it was the most boring, miserable match you ever saw in your entire life because they were just legitimately shooting on each other instead of entertaining. It was an ugly, ugly match. So, but it's been my pleasure to just dig up these stories and to bring these ladies to life and seeing Elvira and Jim Mitchell included in this movie was just fantastic for me. So just really awesome. And I encourage people, seek out these stories, definitely if you're from Louisville, you want to read the story of Jim Mitchell. He was from Louisville and he was one of the first African-American champions. And you should definitely read June Byers' book too, because there is another side to the story. She is the villain in the movie. Do you know if you knew this or not, but June's granddaughter was sitting pretty close to you that week at Actors Theater. She was in the crowd. She was an extra on the film, and got a photo with Camille, the lady who played her grandmother. So Kay Parker, one of June Byers' granddaughters, is in the movie watching that match. So, which is really, really cool.
So cool.
Yeah. And of course, to find all of John's books that we've talked about tonight, plus his bios on Tracy Smothers, Dr. David Schultz, Madman Pondo, or Louisville wrestling history. You got at least two wrestling at Louisville wrestling.
Two on wrestling in Louisville. Don't forget Chris Candido too. So Princess Victoria while we're at it, and of course, Dean Hill. Dean Hill's got a fantastic story. He is, he's very, very, very humble to a fault about it. Dean, I know that you look and, Danny's the one that brought OVW to town, and, Rip's the guy who trained everybody, and Jimmy's the guy who brought WW to town. You were the face of OVW. You're the guy that everybody knows. And that's why, that's part of why everybody puts you on that Mount Rushmore of Louisville, Louisville wrestling and OVW. So we appreciate you. We appreciate all you've done. And, and just, everything you've done in your career. It was definitely my honor to tell your story and to put it in print.
Well, I'm just one of these guys that walked through a door that was open. Mm-hmm. And I never dreamed of ever being involved in professional wrestling. And all of a sudden one night, Miss Christine said, "Will you do this for us?" And the next thing you know, I was in professional wrestling for 32 years. Mm-hmm. When Cornette came to OVW, I pulled on the back lot one night to do the show, and there's 3 guys that were standing there that walked up to me and says, "Hi, we're new here. I understand you're the TV guy with Jim." I said, "Yeah, I'm Dean Hill." He said, "Well, nice to meet you. My name is John Cena. My name is Brock Lesnar. My name is Shelton Benjamin." So it was amazing to be with these guys before they ever got involved. There was one gentleman that I'm eating at a Chinese buffet one day, and Dave Batista walked in with his wife at the time, and they came and sat down with me, and he was talking about, I've got an opportunity to read in this movie. I don't know, it sounds goofy. I don't know if I should do it. I said, "Man, if I was you, I would consider doing it, because if this thing hits, you could be in Comic-Cons for the rest of your life. You don't get a pension in professional wrestling, but if you get this movie, this could be big." And it was Guardians of the Galaxy.
He owes you some money, Dave.
I don't even know if he remembers it, but it was a true story.
And of course, there's a lot of other pictures that are in the book. We gotta give the picture here one more time here for "See You at Ringside." But there's also a picture of you with a young up and coming wrestler at the time, Mr. Flex Cavana, who's since kind of moved on up in the world there.
Flex came up to me and he said, "I'm going to Connecticut tomorrow. I want to thank you for putting me over." And I said, "Well, if you don't know, Connecticut, Vince McMahon just hired him, and putting me over means telling everybody, hey, this guy's going to be a star. You better get your picture taken with him now while you still can." And when he went up there, they changed his name from Flex Cavana to Prince Rocky Mahavia. And of course, we're talking about The Rock.
Yeah.
I will say too, there's a really funny Flex Cavana story in the updated version of Bluegrass Brawlers, which is on my website. The late he just passed away, a guy by the name of Michael Ewing, who was a big part of the indie scene around here, and really a big part of Eat Sleep Wrestle in the early days. He was one of my dedicated proofreaders and editors and stuff, and the guy got me a lot of interviews. And unfortunately, just at a young age, he just passed away just a couple weeks ago. But Michael told me. And it's in the book. You got to read it. It's a really funny story about young Flex Cavana and Michael calling him out on a little piece of kayfabe while he was at the Louisville Gardens. It's a really funny story. I'll tell you guys off air if you want to stick around, because I know we're almost out of time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we got to wrap up here, but of course, plugged earlier, eatsleepwrestle.com is the one place to go for all of John's books there, for a multitude of outstanding wrestlers, some great stories there as well. But one thing I definitely got to get to that is one of my, of course, I've definitely followed your wrestling career, Dean, and even some of your music stuff as well. But couple of things you're up to these days here is just outstanding. If you want to talk about what you're doing these days now.
Well, I entertain in senior homes. I put together a totally make-believe radio station called WYOU Radio, taking you back in time. And I go into senior homes and pretend to be the radio DJ and play all the songs from when they were in their 20s. And I'm in the wedding business. So if you want to get married, dearly beloved and honored guests, we are gathered here today.
I love it. Yeah, some of the stories you've shared for WYOU, and basically, folks who basically weren't maybe as active, kind of, in their later stages, like they're hearing songs of their youth, and suddenly they're up and dancing and moving around. So it's just some outstanding stories that even just coming from WYOU. So I got to give you your flowers on that one, Dean. It's an outstanding thing you're doing there.
I'm honored. Thank you so much.
And thank you guys both for being on the show here for a very special episode of the Fanatic Forum for the Multiverse Fundraiser. And before we go, of course, we got to give a little shout out here to Comic Books for Kids. So we're going to end with this video here. But gentlemen, thank you so much for being here tonight. I greatly appreciate this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And we're going to end tonight here for a little shout out for Comic Books for Kids. So we'll be right back with our next panel for the Cosplay Cafe. We'll see you in a bit.
The Multiverse Fundraiser is partnering with Comic Books for Kids to raise money for their cause. Their mission is to provide comic books to children in hospitals and cancer centers across the United States, Canada, and the UK. We believe in the importance of providing stories that promote hope and bravery to kids who are facing things that are scarier than any supervillain. And we truly believe in this cause. To donate, you can either go to our Facebook page at www.facebook.com/The Multiverse Fundraiser or directly to comicbooksforkids.org.
The Multiverse Fundraiser would like to thank our sponsors: Earth Dog Studios, Clobbern Comics, The Art of Brian Rodman, Studio Moonfall, Elusive Comics, and of course, the Phoenix Sisters Entertainment Network for hosting this event. Learn how to support these businesses on the MVFR website.